A rich CEO stormed into a quiet gas station on the edge of town, shouting about a wrong receipt. When the young cashier tried to explain, he slapped her so hard she hit the counter and fell. Everyone froze, terrified. He thought no one would dare interfere, but just outside by the pumps, a Navy SEAL and his K-9 were watching. And they had seen everything. Before the story begins, let us know where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more. The wind coming off the plains of Montana carried a chill that made even the gas pumps rattle in their frames. It was late afternoon, the kind of cold gray day where the light never quite warmed the pavement. Inside the old roadside station off Route 87, amber bulbs hummed above rows of snacks and dusty coffee machines. A single radio played faint country music, the sound drifting through the quiet like something half-forgotten. Behind the counter stood Lily, the 25-year-old blonde cashier with tired blue eyes, wrapping her cardigan tighter as she checked the register. It had been a long shift, one of those days where the heater fought, but never quite won. Outside, a black Mercedes rolled to a stop beside Pump 3. The man who stepped out was Nathan Hale, the 42-year-old CEO of a regional construction empire, his tailored black coat snapping in the wind. He walked with the sharpness of someone used to being obeyed, the kind of man whose voice always filled a room before his conscience did. Inside the store, a few customers milled about, a trucker with a coffee cup, a mother buying milk for the drive home. When Nathan pushed through the glass door, the bell above it gave a soft jingle that didn't fit the weight of his presence. He strode straight to the counter, his shoes clicking against the tile. Lily smiled politely, as she did for everyone. "Afternoon, sir. Pumping or paying inside?" she asked, her voice warm despite the cold. He slapped a crumpled receipt down in front of her. "You overcharged me," he said flatly. She glanced at it. "Looks like the prepay didn't finish running through. I can fix it." Before she could finish, Nathan's voice cut across the store. "Do you know who I am?" The trucker looked up from his coffee. The young mother froze near the refrigerated aisle. Lily blinked, startled. "No, sir, Of course you don't," he interrupted, leaning closer. "No one here ever does their job right. Every damn time I come through this town, someone screws it up." His hand slammed the counter hard enough to rattle the candy display. Lily took a small step back, keeping her voice calm. "I'll make it right, sir. It'll just take a minute." He sneered. "You think a minute of your time fixes mine?" And before anyone could react, he struck her across the face with the back of his hand. The sound cracked through the store. Lily stumbled into the register, gasping, one hand to her cheek. The mother by the fridge covered her child's eyes. The trucker froze mid-step. No one moved. Nathan adjusted his cufflinks like he'd just brushed off dust. "Maybe now you'll focus," he muttered. From outside, through the glass, a shape shifted near the pumps. Marcus Reed, the 38-year-old Navy SEAL, had been filling his old Ford truck, lost in thought. His K-9 partner, Ranger, a dark-coated German shepherd, sitting alert in the passenger seat. He saw the slap through the reflection in the window. His jaw tightened. Years of training didn't make him impulsive, but some lines didn't need orders. Marcus capped the pump, eyes narrowing as he scanned the scene through the glass. Ranger gave a low, instinctive growl, ears twitching. Inside, Nathan was still speaking, louder now. "You think I won't have you fired? I built half this damn state. You're lucky I don't—" The bell jingled again. Marcus stepped inside, his boots silent on the tile, the door closing softly behind him. His presence changed the air immediately, calm, deliberate, the kind of quiet that carried weight. He stood between the aisles, his coat dusted with cold air, his voice even. "Apologize," he said. Nathan turned, annoyed, as if brushing off a mosquito. "Excuse me." Marcus's gaze stayed level. "You hit her. Apologize." A flicker of confusion crossed Nathan's face, followed quickly by arrogance. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "A man who just hit a woman," Marcus replied evenly. Ranger's low rumble echoed from outside, muffled through the glass, but unmistakable. The trucker slowly set his cup down. The mother clutched her child closer. Nathan took a step forward, his voice rising. "You think you can talk to me like that? You don't belong here, you're nothing." Marcus's tone didn't change. "You're embarrassing yourself. Leave before it gets worse." For a heartbeat, the store hung between silence and chaos. Nathan's hand twitched toward Marcus, half anger, half uncertainty. But before he could act, Ranger barked sharply from outside, the sound splitting the air like thunder. Everyone jumped. Marcus didn't move. "You should go," he said quietly. Nathan's confidence cracked for the first time. His eyes darted toward the door, then back to Marcus. The SEAL didn't need to raise his voice. The stillness around him did it for him. Finally, Nathan scoffed, muttered something about lawsuits, and turned toward the exit. As the bell rang behind him, the tension broke. The mother hurried out. The trucker exhaled shakily. Marcus turned to Lily, who was still shaking slightly, her cheek red. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her eyes glistened. Thank you. You didn't have to." "Yeah," Marcus said softly. "I did." He stepped outside, the cold wind biting again. Ranger waited near the door, tail still, eyes fixed on Nathan, who was pacing by his car, phone pressed to his ear, fury in every motion. Marcus watched him for a moment, the kind of look soldiers carried, measuring, calculating, remembering. Then he crouched beside Ranger, giving the dog a small pat. "Easy, boy," he murmured. "We're not done yet." The clouds were darkening now, the air heavy with snow that hadn't fallen yet. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train wailed, its sound lost in the coming storm. Nathan's car peeled away from the station, tires screeching on wet asphalt, anger disappearing down the highway. Marcus stood there a moment longer before turning back inside. Lily was cleaning up the spilled coins near the register, her hands trembling. "You don't have to do that right now," he said quietly. She gave a weak smile. "It helps, keeps me from thinking about it." Marcus nodded. "You did nothing wrong. He's just used to people being afraid of him." She hesitated. "You've seen men like that before?" "Too many," Marcus said. "Some in suits, some in uniforms." He pulled a business card from his jacket, sliding it across the counter. "If he comes back, call this number, day or night." She looked down. The card was plain, no title, just his name, Marcus Reed, and a number written in steady black ink. "Are you a cop?" she asked. "No," he said simply, "just someone who hates bullies." Ranger barked once, as if to agree. Marcus gave her a small nod and stepped out into the wind again. The station lights flickered as the temperature dropped. For a moment, Lily stood there, staring at the door, heart pounding, wondering who that man really was, and why his eyes had looked like he had already seen too much. Snow began to fall that evening, soft flakes turning the Montana highway into a blur of white and silver. The gas station lights glowed against the darkness, a small oasis in the storm. Marcus, the Navy SEAL, sat in his truck across the street, engine idling low. Ranger, the German shepherd, curled on the passenger seat beside him. The dog's ears twitched with every passing sound, the distant howl of wind, the hum of tires on the highway. Marcus watched through the windshield as Lily, the blonde cashier, locked the door and hurried to her car. Her breath fogged the air as she looked around nervously before driving off into the cold. He waited until her taillights disappeared, then exhaled slowly. Trouble like Nathan Hale didn't just end with one slap and a warning. Men like that came back. They always did. Across town, in a sleek office lit by glass walls and anger, Nathan was pacing, his phone pressed hard to his ear. "I don't care what it takes, Carl," he hissed. "Find out who that man is, the one at the station." "The guy with the dog." His assistant stammered something inaudible. Nathan slammed his hand on the desk. "I'm not letting some nobody humiliate me in front of half the damn town. Do it tonight." He hung up, his reflection staring back from the window. Cold eyes, the face of a man who had never been told no. Outside, the snow fell harder, burying his car under a soft white layer. Nathan didn't notice. His mind was already writing the next act of revenge. The next morning the storm had calmed, leaving Pine Hollow coated in pale frost. Lily returned to work early, bundled in a scarf and thick gloves. She unlocked the station and turned on the lights, the hum of the heaters slowly filling the room. For a while it was just another quiet morning, coffee brewing, diesel trucks stopping, travelers coming and going. But sometime after 9, she noticed a black SUV idling by the pumps, its windows tinted dark. Her stomach knotted. The door didn't open. The engine didn't cut. It just sat there, running. She reached for her phone. Miles away, Marcus was helping a friend repair a broken fence on the edge of town when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Hello?" "Mr. Reed?" Lily's voice was small, shaking. "He's here." "That man. The one from yesterday. He's outside." Marcus was already moving before she finished. "Stay inside," he said. "Don't talk to him. Lock the door." "I did, but he's not alone." When he pulled into the gas station lot, he killed the headlights and watched. 2 men stood near the SUV, thick jackets, earpieces, the kind of posture that screamed hired muscle. Inside the store, Lily stood behind the counter, pale but steady. Nathan was leaning against the counter like he owned it, his gloved hand tapping rhythmically. Marcus could hear the tone of his voice even through the glass, mocking, slow, deliberate. He was enjoying himself. Marcus opened the truck door quietly. "Stay," he whispered to Ranger. The dog didn't move, eyes fixed forward. Marcus crossed the lot, his boots crunching softly over the snow. He pushed open the door, and once again the bell chimed, the sound that always marked the shift between calm and chaos. Nathan turned, smiling, when he saw him. "Well, look who it is, the hero." Marcus's expression didn't change. "You weren't invited back," Nathan chuckled. "You think you can ban me from a gas station? You're not the law." "No," Marcus said, "but I don't need to be." Nathan gestured toward Lily. "I came to apologize," he said mockingly. "Didn't I, sweetheart?" Lily's voice was a whisper. "You should leave." Nathan leaned closer, his voice dropping to something darker. "See? I don't like being told what to do, and I don't like people making me look weak." He straightened, turning to Marcus. "You cost me face. That's expensive where I come from." Marcus's eyes flicked to the 2 men outside. "You brought company," Nathan smirked. "Insurance?" Ranger barked once, loud and sharp, from the truck outside. The sound made the bodyguards glance toward the noise. Marcus didn't move. "If you're smart, you'll get back in your car and drive away," he said quietly. "You're not going to win this." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Win? I already have. You see, I make calls. People answer. That's how the world works." "Not this world," Marcus said. Nathan laughed once, sharp and bitter. "You think being some washed-up soldier makes you special? You think anyone's going to thank you for this?" "No," Marcus said softly, "but she'll be safe." For a second, Nathan hesitated, just long enough for Marcus to see the flash of uncertainty behind his anger. Then he gestured to his men. The taller one reached inside his coat, but before his hand emerged, Ranger was already moving. The door of Marcus's truck burst open, and the German shepherd hit the snow like a bullet. The dog closed the distance in seconds, teeth bared, growl low and commanding. The man froze, hands up, eyes wide. Ranger stopped inches away, growl vibrating through the cold air. Marcus stepped forward. "Tell him to stop," Nathan said, voice rising. "Call him off." Marcus shook his head. "You call yours off first." For a moment no one breathed. Then Nathan's men stepped back slowly, palms up. Nathan's bravado cracked. "You think this is over?" he snapped. Marcus's eyes hardened. "No, but I think you're done for today." Nathan glared at him, then turned sharply and stormed out. The SUV's tires spun against the snow as it tore out of the lot, disappearing into the gray distance. Ranger stood in the doorway, panting, watching, until the sound faded. Marcus knelt, scratching behind the dog's ear. "Good work," he murmured. Lily was still behind the counter, tears streaking her face, relief and fear colliding in her eyes. "I don't understand," she said softly. "Why would he do this?" "Because people like him never think someone will stand up to them," Marcus replied. "They always think fear keeps them safe." He looked out the window at the empty road. But fear is only a shield until someone breaks it. Outside, the snow began falling again, quiet and endless. Marcus gave Lily a reassuring nod before heading back to his truck. As he opened the door, Ranger climbed in, glancing up as if asking what came next. Marcus started the engine, eyes on the road. "We're not done, buddy," he said quietly. He'll try again, and next time we'll be ready. That night the storm came back harder. Snow whipped against the windows of Pine Hollow like ghostly hands, and the wind howled through the narrow streets. Marcus, the Navy SEAL, sat by the window of his small cabin outside town, the wood stove crackling faintly beside him. Ranger, the German shepherd, slept by the door, muscles twitching with dreams. On the table lay a folder Marcus had started building. Photos, names, newspaper clippings. He wasn't a cop, but old habits died hard. When people like Nathan Hale came to town, they always left a trail of trouble. The man had money and rage, two things that, when combined, ruined lives. Marcus sipped his coffee, watching the storm erase the world outside. He knew Nathan wouldn't give up. Men like that didn't take humiliation quietly. Across town, Nathan sat in his office again, nursing a drink and staring at his reflection in the glass wall. He had called his lawyers, his PR team, even a few local officials who owed him favors, but the calls hadn't gone his way. Word was spreading. Someone had recorded what happened at the station. A trucker had uploaded it anonymously. The slap, the confrontation, the moment the SEAL walked in. Nathan's name was trending in places he didn't want it to be. Rage turned his stomach cold. "You want to embarrass me?" he muttered under his breath, gripping the glass so tightly it cracked. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." By morning, the video had made its way through Pine Hollow. The locals didn't say much, small towns rarely did, but they looked at Lily, the blonde cashier, differently, not with pity, but quiet respect. When she came in that morning, a cup of coffee waited on the counter from the trucker who'd filmed it. She gave a small smile, though her eyes still carried the shadow of what had happened. She'd slept little, haunted by the image of Nathan's hand, by the sound of that slap. But what lingered more was Marcus, the calm in his eyes, the steadiness that felt like safety itself. Late that afternoon, as the storm eased into a pale dusk, Marcus drove back into town. He parked near the station, watching the quiet rhythm of the day. People came and went, unaware of the tension simmering beneath the surface. Lily looked up when she saw him through the window, her shoulders relaxing. She opened the door for him, the bell chiming softly. "You didn't have to come," she said, smiling faintly. "Just making sure things stay calm," Marcus replied. "How's your cheek?" "It's healing," she said, touching it lightly. "People have been kind. That helps." Ranger padded in behind him, tail low, head turning slowly as he scanned the room, a soldier's dog doing his rounds. Marcus crouched and scratched his ear. "We're keeping an eye on things, right, boy?" Ranger wagged once, the sound of his tail thumping against the floor. Lily leaned on the counter, her voice quieter. "He won't stop, will he?" Marcus shook his head. "Not until someone makes him." She hesitated. "You sound like you've seen this before." "I have," he said. "Different countries, different uniforms, the same kind of men." The door opened behind them, letting in a gust of cold air. Sheriff Dwyer, the graying, broad-shouldered lawman of Pine Hollow, stepped inside, his coat dusted with snow. "Morning, Reed," he said. "Heard you were around?" Marcus nodded. "Sheriff?" Dwyer's eyes shifted to Lily, softening. "You holding up?" She nodded. "Trying." The sheriff sighed. "That video put us in a bind. The state wants me to open an investigation. Problem is, Hale's got lawyers crawling out of every hole in Helena. They're claiming it's staged. Marcus's jaw tightened. You saw it. You know what happened. I do, Dwyer said. But knowing and proving aren't the same. He's got connections up the ladder. So he gets away with it, Lily said bitterly. Not if I can help it, Marcus said. The sheriff gave him a long look. You planning to play hero again? Marcus didn't answer, but the silence said enough. Dwyer exhaled, shaking his head. Just be careful. Guys like Hale, they don't fight clean. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. Oh, and Reed? There's talk he's bringing in someone from out of state. A fixer. Thought you'd want to know. After the sheriff left, the air felt heavier. Lily glanced at Marcus. A fixer? Someone paid to make problems disappear, Marcus said. Used to run into them overseas. Different job, same principles. Lily swallowed hard. What does that mean for us? It means, Marcus said quietly, you don't walk home alone anymore. Marcus stopped at the entrance, Ranger staring out the window beside him. He knew a trap when he saw one. Still, he couldn't let it go. He turned onto the path, headlights dim, engine low. The road twisted through the forest, branches scraping the truck's sides. The snow had stopped falling, but the silence felt heavier than before. Half a mile in, he saw the SUV parked ahead, engine off, doors open. Ranger growled. Marcus reached for the flashlight and stepped out, crunching through the snow. Stay, he said softly. The dog whined, but obeyed. Marcus moved closer, scanning the shadows between the trees. Then, from behind him, came the click of a gun being cocked. Should have stayed out of it, soldier, a voice said. It was low, unfamiliar. Marcus turned slowly. A man stepped out of the dark, broad, clean-cut, ex-military by the look of him. The fixer, Marcus thought. The man smiled coldly. Hale pays well, and you just made my week harder. Marcus raised his hand slightly. You sure you want to do this? The man shrugged. You'll be gone before anyone cares. Before he could raise the gun, Ranger's growl turned into a snarl. The man glanced toward the sound too late. The German shepherd launched from the shadows, hitting him full force. The gun fired once into the air before disappearing into the snow. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist, twisting hard. The gun clattered to the ground. A punch, a knee, another twist, and the fight ended as fast as it started. The man hit the snow, breath knocked out, staring up at the night sky. Ranger stood over him, teeth bared but holding. Marcus knelt beside him. You tell Hale if he sends anyone else, I'll find him myself. The man groaned, nodding weakly. Marcus stood, calling Ranger back. Together they walked to the truck, leaving the man in the cold. As Marcus started the engine, he looked once more down the forest path. The SUV's taillights flickered dimly in the distance, fading like dying embers. Come on, boy, Marcus said. We're taking this fight to him now. The next morning broke with sunlight glinting off the snowdrifts, painting Pine Hollow in cold gold. Marcus, the Navy SEAL, barely slept. He sat on the porch of his cabin with a mug of black coffee, the steam curling in the air, while Ranger, the German shepherd, watched the woods with quiet vigilance. The fight from the night before replayed in his mind. The fixer's voice, the look of recognition when Marcus mentioned Hale's name. This wasn't random anymore. It was escalation. He opened his laptop and started typing, pulling up old contact lists, military databases he technically shouldn't have access to anymore. It didn't take long. Within an hour, he found the fixer's name, Dylan Cross, ex-private contractor with a history of violence buried under corporate paperwork, funded by one of Hale's shell companies. Marcus leaned back, jaw tightening. So that's how you play, he muttered. Ranger tilted his head, sensing the tension. We're not done, boy, Marcus said quietly. We're just getting started. By noon, word of the forest confrontation had already reached town, though no one knew details. The sheriff's office got a call about gunfire near the river, but when deputies arrived, there was nothing but tire tracks and snow. Sheriff Dwyer showed up at Marcus's cabin an hour later, boots crunching against the frozen ground. "You want to tell me why my deputies found signs of a fight near the woods?" he asked, stepping onto the porch. Marcus didn't look up from his coffee. "Someone followed me. I convinced him to stop." The sheriff frowned. "Convinced how?" Marcus met his eyes. "He's alive." Dwyer sighed, rubbing his temples. "You can't keep handling this on your own, Reed. This isn't a deployment. It's my town, my jurisdiction." "Then handle it," Marcus said. "Because Hale won't stop until someone makes him." Dwyer paused, measuring his tone. "You think I don't know what that man is? I've been dealing with his kind for 20 years, but there's a line between justice and war." Marcus looked out at the snow. "War's just what happens when justice fails." The sheriff stared for a long moment, then turned toward his truck. "Don't make me clean up after you again." When he was gone, Marcus stood there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of his own words. Meanwhile, Nathan Hale wasn't sleeping either. The fixer had called him early that morning, his voice weak, broken. "He's not just some guy, Hale," Dillon said. "He's trained. You didn't tell me I was going after a SEAL?" Hale's hand clenched around his phone. "I don't care who he is," he snapped. "I pay you to solve problems, not bring them back." But when the call ended, Hale sat there, staring at the skyline from his office window. For the first time in a long time, he felt something close to fear, the kind that comes from losing control. He poured himself another drink, trying to drown the thought that maybe, just maybe, this was a fight he couldn't buy his way out of. Later that afternoon, Lily, the blonde cashier, arrived at work to find the sheriff's cruiser parked outside. Dwyer was talking to her manager, a heavy-set man with tired eyes. When he saw her, he gave a small nod. "You doing all right?" he asked. "Better," she said, though she didn't sound convinced. "We're keeping an extra eye on things," Dwyer said. "That man's still in town somewhere. If he shows up again, you call me first." She nodded, her hands tightening around her coat. "And Reed?" she asked quietly. "He's around," the sheriff said, "but don't depend on him too much." "He's not exactly subtle," she smiled faintly. "Neither is Justice." When the sheriff left, Lily went about her shift, but every time the bell above the door jingled, her heart skipped. By late evening, the lights from the pumps cast long shadows through the glass, and she caught herself glancing toward the parking lot too often. Marcus watched from his truck across the street again, engine off, Ranger lying beside him. He didn't like being this visible, but something about Hale's quiet made him uneasy. Silence, in his experience, meant planning. Around 9, Lily turned off the main lights and began counting the register. The street outside was still, except for the occasional passing car. Marcus was just about to call it a night when Ranger lifted his head and gave a low growl. "What is it?" Marcus whispered, scanning the road. A black sedan rolled to a slow stop near the edge of the lot. No headlights, no plates. Marcus reached for the binoculars. Inside, 2 men sat unmoving, not locals. "Here we go," Marcus murmured. He started the engine but kept his lights off. The sedan doors opened and the men stepped out, heading for the station. One carried a duffel bag, the other reached for something under his coat. Inside, Lily looked up as the door swung open. "Sorry, we're closed," she said automatically. But her voice faltered when she saw their faces, hard, expressionless. The first man smiled faintly. "Not for us, you're not." Before she could react, Marcus's truck screeched across the lot, headlights blazing through the glass. The men froze as the doors burst open. Ranger hit the first one before he could draw his weapon, the impact sending him crashing into a display of chips. Marcus was through the door a second later, tackling the other man into a shelf. The duffel bag spilled open, duct tape, gloves, and a small silenced pistol sliding across the floor. "Stay down!" Marcus barked. Lily dropped behind the counter, trembling. The fight was fast, violent, over in seconds. When the first man tried to rise, Ranger pinned him again, a deep growl vibrating through the floor. Marcus grabbed the pistol and kicked the duffel aside. "Who sent you?" he demanded. You know who. Say it. Hale. The word came out like a curse. Marcus nodded, jaw tightening. He tied their wrists with their own duct tape and called the sheriff. Dwyer arrived 10 minutes later, sirens off, eyes widening at the scene. You couldn't wait for backup, huh? Marcus shrugged. They weren't waiting either. The sheriff cuffed the men and loaded them into his cruiser. You realize this is going to blow back hard, right? Yeah, Marcus said. That's the point. When they were gone, Marcus turned to Lily. You okay? She nodded shakily, her eyes glistening. You saved my life. You already did that yourself, he said softly. You called me. Ranger barked once, as if to punctuate the moment. By the time Marcus stepped outside, the night was silent again. Snow had started to fall, light and steady. He stood by his truck for a moment, looking out at the empty road. He knew what would come next. Hale would be furious. He'd throw money, influence, threats, everything he had left. But Marcus had seen empires fall from men smaller than Nathan Hale. He looked down at Ranger, who was watching him, eyes steady. We finish this tomorrow, Marcus said. The dog wagged his tail once, as if he understood. Marcus climbed into the truck, starting the engine. Behind him, the gas station lights flickered, casting one last golden glow before going dark. Somewhere beyond the trees, in the warm lights of his mansion, Nathan Hale poured another drink and smiled to himself, already planning the next move. But this time, he wasn't the only one ready for a fight. Morning came with a bitter wind sweeping through Pine Hollow, bending the trees and rattling the windows of the diner across from the sheriff's office. Marcus, the Navy SEAL, sat in a corner booth nursing a cup of black coffee, the kind that tasted more like burnt determination than rest. Ranger, the German shepherd, lay at his feet, quiet but alert. The newspaper on the counter had his handiwork on the front page. Local CEO under investigation after violent incident. There was a grainy still from the gas station security footage. Nathan Hale's face caught mid-slap. Fury and arrogance frozen in time. The story hadn't gone national yet, but it would. Marcus knew men like Hale. They burned bright and loud before they fell apart completely. Still, there was a tightness in his chest that didn't ease. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was worried about Lily, the blonde cashier. People like Hale didn't just retaliate. They annihilated whatever reminded them of their own weakness. Outside, the sheriff's cruiser rolled past slowly, crunching snow under its tires. Sheriff Dwyer stepped in a few minutes later, coat heavy with frost. "Morning, Reed," he said. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." Marcus gave a dry smile. "Feels like longer." The sheriff slid into the booth opposite him, ordering coffee with a nod. "We've got the two you caught last night in holding. They're not talking, but their phones are full of messages from one of Hale's assistants. I've already sent it to the state." Marcus looked up. "That won't stop him." "No," Dwyer agreed, "but it might slow him down." He leaned back, studying the seal. "You're not planning on going after him, are you?" "I'm not planning anything," Marcus said quietly. "But I'm not waiting around either." The sheriff sighed. "You can't protect her forever, Reed. You need to let the law work." Marcus's eyes darkened. "The law's been working for him for years. It's about time it worked for someone else." The sheriff didn't argue. He just shook his head and left the check on the table. "You didn't hear it from me," he said at the door, "but Hale's flying out tonight. Private airfield on the North Ridge. If he leaves the state, he'll be untouchable for months." Marcus didn't reply, but his jaw set. Ranger raised his head, ears twitching. They both knew what that meant. By late afternoon, clouds had rolled back in, turning the sky the color of steel. Lily finished her shift early, the station manager insisting she take time off. When she stepped outside, Marcus's truck was waiting near the curb. He leaned against the door, coat zipped to his chin. "You're not supposed to be here," she said softly. "Neither are you," he replied. She gave a small smile despite herself. "Is it true? He's leaving town?" Marcus nodded. "Tonight. Probably for a while. But men like him always come back unless someone makes sure they don't." You mean the police? She asked. Marcus didn't answer. His silence was its own reply. Lily looked down, snow crunching under her boots. I don't want anyone hurt because of me, she whispered. It's not about you, Marcus said. It's about stopping a man who thinks he can buy forgiveness. He opened the truck door. Go home. Lock your doors. Don't open them for anyone but the sheriff. She hesitated. What about you? I've got something to take care of. Their eyes met for a brief second before she nodded and walked toward her car. Ranger watched her until she was gone. Night came fast. The wind picked up, carrying the taste of snow and jet fuel. Marcus parked his truck a half-mile from the private airstrip, hidden behind a stand of pines. Through the binoculars, he could see Hale's black Mercedes parked near a sleek silver jet. Two men loaded suitcases into the cargo hold, while a third checked the manifest. Hale stood beside them, phone in hand, dressed in his usual black coat and arrogance. He looked unbothered, like a man heading off for vacation instead of fleeing an investigation. Marcus exhaled slowly, watching every movement. Ranger sat beside him, restless, reading his tension like a mirror. Stay, Marcus whispered. The dog gave a low whine, but didn't move. Marcus slipped from the truck, his boots silent on the snow. He moved through the trees, using the wind as cover, every sense tuned to the rhythm of the night. When he reached the chain-link fence, he crouched low, cutting through it with practiced precision. The cold air bit his face, but his focus didn't waver. He waited until one of the bodyguards turned away before crossing the open ground. Hale's voice carried faintly over the hum of the jet. Make sure everything's ready. I want to be in the air in 5 minutes. Marcus approached from the shadows, hands steady, pulse even. He wasn't here to kill Hale. He was here to make sure the man faced what he'd done. As he'd neared the jet, one of the guards spotted movement. Hey, the man shouted, raising his weapon. Marcus dove behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the snow. He rolled, came up behind the man, and disarmed him in a single motion. The second guard turned too slow. A sharp elbow to the jaw dropped him instantly. Hale stumbled back, eyes wide, fury twisting into fear. You, he spat, you just don't know when to stop. Marcus straightened, breathing hard but controlled. Neither do you, Hale laughed bitterly, even as his voice cracked. What are you going to do? Arrest me? You think anyone will believe you over me? I own everything, from here to Billings. Marcus took a step forward. You don't own truth. That's the one thing you can't buy. Hale's jaw clenched. You think you're a hero? You're nothing. You're one man with a dog. That's all I need. Hale reached inside his coat, but Marcus was faster. He twisted Hale's arm, sending the gun clattering across the tarmac. You're done, Marcus said. Hale struggled, but Marcus shoved him toward the jet. You'll get your flight, Marcus said. Just not where you planned. He pulled a small recording device from his pocket and held it up. Your fixer gave me everything, the payments, the calls, the recordings. It's all ready with the sheriff and the feds. Hale's face drained of color. You think this changes anything? He hissed. You'll regret crossing me. Marcus stared at him, eyes steady. I don't regret standing up to men like you. I regret there aren't more people who do. Before Hale could reply, flashing lights appeared down the road, the sheriff's cruisers, the roar of engines cutting through the cold night. Dwyer stepped out first, hand on his holster. You couldn't just wait for us, could you? He called out. Marcus stepped back, letting Hale stumble forward into the light. He's all yours, Marcus said. The sheriff's deputies cuffed Hale, reading his rights over the wind. Hale's voice broke into curses that the night swallowed whole. Dwyer gave Marcus a long look. You sure know how to pick your fights. Marcus managed a tired smile. Some fights pick you. The sheriff nodded. Go home, Reed. Get some rest. You've done enough. Marcus glanced toward Ranger, who waited by the truck, tail wagging once. Not yet, Marcus said softly. Not until she's safe. The days after Nathan Hale's arrest brought a strange quiet to Pine Hollow, the kind that felt fragile, like snow balancing on the edge of a branch. The news spread fast. Local papers called it justice, while bigger outlets hinted at corruption, power, and downfall. But for Marcus, the Navy SEAL, it wasn't over. He knew men like Hale didn't crumble easily. They clawed their way back through lawyers, allies, or worse. He stayed low for a few days, splitting time between his cabin and short drives through town. Sheriff Dwyer had told him the FBI was taking over the case, that Hale would be transferred to Helena for questioning, but Marcus had seen too much in his life to believe it was finished. Ranger, the German shepherd, stayed close, his instincts mirroring Marcus's unease. Late one evening, as the sky burned orange over the mountains, Marcus sat outside the gas station again. Lily, the blonde cashier, stepped out with a jacket too thin for the cold. "You still watching over me?" she asked with a faint smile. "Old habits die hard," Marcus said. She stood beside him, breath visible in the fading light. "They say he's gone for good. You don't believe that?" Marcus shook his head. "Men like him always have one more play. He's not used to losing." She studied his face for a moment, then said softly, "And what about you? You look like someone who's been losing for a long time." Marcus didn't answer right away. "Maybe," he said finally, "but not tonight." For a few days things stayed still. The station was busy again, kids on their way to school, truckers passing through. Marcus helped Dwyer with small security checks, more for peace of mind than necessity. Lily started smiling again, her confidence returning bit by bit. But beneath the calm, attention remained, like a clock ticking somewhere just out of earshot. Then, on the fourth night after the arrest, it started again. Marcus was halfway home when he noticed a pair of headlights following him through the back road. He slowed. So did they. He turned off onto a side trail. The car followed. "You see it too, don't you?" he said, glancing at Ranger. The dog gave a low growl, confirming what Marcus already knew. He killed the headlights and pulled over into the trees, watching as a dark sedan crawled past, windows tinted, plates covered. "He's not done," Marcus muttered. He waited until the car disappeared before turning back toward town. At the sheriff's office, Dwyer listened with a scowl. "We've got Hale in custody. No way this ties back to him." "You sure?" Marcus asked. "Money doesn't stop moving just because a man's in a cell." Dwyer sighed. "I'll send a car to watch the girl's house tonight." "No," Marcus said. "You don't have enough deputies, and he'll go after her again. I'll stay nearby." The sheriff hesitated, then nodded. "Just don't make a mess. I have to clean up." Marcus gave a thin smile. "I'll try." That night, snow began to fall again, thick and heavy, covering the roads faster than the plows could handle. Lily's small house sat at the edge of town, her porch light glowing faintly through the storm. Marcus parked a block away, engine off, watching through binoculars. Ranger rested his head on Marcus's armrest, eyes never leaving the house. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Then, just after 1, the sound of an engine broke through the wind. A truck stopped 2 houses down. Its lights went out. Marcus's pulse quickened. He could make out 3 figures climbing out. One headed toward the backyard, another toward the front porch. The third stayed by the truck, scanning the road. Marcus grabbed his coat and checked his sidearm. "Stay," he whispered. Ranger whimpered, but obeyed. He moved through the storm, using the darkness as cover. The snow muffled every step. The man by the truck never saw him coming. A quick shove, a silent takedown, and he was out cold. Marcus moved toward the house. Through the window he saw Lily standing near the kitchen, phone in hand, trembling. One of the men was already inside. Marcus didn't think. He acted. He kicked open the door, gun raised. The intruder spun around, startled, holding a knife. Marcus fired once, a clean shot to the shoulder, dropping the man instantly. "Get down!" he shouted to Lily. She hit the floor as another figure appeared in the hallway, gun drawn. Marcus ducked behind the table as bullets tore through the room. Splinters flew, glass shattered. Ranger's bark exploded from outside, followed by the thud of heavy paws. The second man's aim broke when the dog crashed through the back door, tackling him hard. Marcus moved in, disarming him with a precise twist. Silence followed, the kind that hummed in the bones after violence. Lily was shaking, her breath ragged. Marcus holstered his weapon and crouched beside her. "It's over," he said quietly. "You're safe." Dwyer arrived 15 minutes later, the flashing lights painting the snow red and blue. He took one look at the scene and muttered, "They came for her. Hale's money's still moving." The sheriff rubbed his jaw. "Then we follow it. But next time, call me before the gunfire." Marcus gave a humorless chuckle. "I didn't plan it that way." Lily, wrapped in a blanket, stepped outside, her eyes wide and dazed. She looked at Marcus, voice trembling. "If you hadn't been here—" "Don't think about that," he said gently. "It's done." "No," she whispered. "It's not. You said he'd come back, and you were right." Marcus looked toward the dark horizon, the snow still falling. "He's running out of ways to fight," he said. "Men like Hale, they burn everything until there's nothing left to control. Then they go for the only thing left, the truth." Marcus sat on the hood of his truck as the sun rose, Ranger pressed against his leg. He felt the exhaustion hit him like a wave. The sheriff had promised extra patrols, but Marcus knew Hale's reach extended beyond Pine Hollow, for now, at least, Lily was alive, and that, in his world, was victory enough. He looked down at Ranger. "You did good," he murmured. The dog wagged his tail, eyes half closed. The quiet stretched between them until Lily appeared, walking across the snow with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," she said. Marcus took it, nodding his thanks. "What now?" she asked. Marcus looked at the mountains in the distance, their peaks catching the morning light. "Now," he said softly, "we wait. If he's not done, he'll show his hand soon, and when he does, we'll be ready." The next day dawned gray and quiet, a false peace that didn't fool Marcus, the Navy SEAL, for a second. Pine Hollow looked calm on the surface, but beneath it, tension hummed like an exposed wire. The news of the attack had spread quietly. People whispered in the diner, exchanged uneasy glances at the gas station, and kept their doors locked longer than usual. Sheriff Dwyer doubled his patrols, though everyone knew his small team couldn't cover every road that twisted through the snow-covered hills. Marcus spent the morning repairing the shattered door at Lily's house himself, his gloved hands steady, movements methodical. Lily, the blonde cashier, stood nearby with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching in silence. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "Yes, I do," Marcus replied. "You need the door fixed before nightfall." "That's not what I meant," she said. He didn't look up. "I know." When the last nail was in, he stepped back and tested the frame. It held. Ranger, the German shepherd, trotted up the porch steps, tail brushing against Marcus's leg. "Good as new," Marcus said, wiping his hands. "Better, actually." Lily looked at him, her eyes tired but steady. "You're planning something, aren't you?" "Not planning," he said. "Preparing." The drive to Miller Creek took an hour. Marcus drove in silence, focused on the terrain, the rhythm of the engine, and the faint hum of the heater. Ranger sat alert in the passenger seat, occasionally pressing his paw against Marcus's leg like a silent reminder they were in this together. When they reached the turnoff, the forest closed in around them, heavy and still. The old lumber yard was a skeleton of what it had been, rusted saw frames, half-collapsed buildings, and stacks of rotting timber that looked like graves in the snow. Marcus parked a quarter-mile out and continued on foot, moving with the same quiet precision that had kept him alive through more dangerous nights. As he approached the main structure, he could hear faint voices, the metallic clink of weapons being loaded. He crouched behind a stack of barrels and listened. "Hale wants to move before dark," one man said. "He's got a chopper lined up. Says we're burning everything that's left." Another voice, colder, smoother, answered, "No loose ends, especially not the girl." Marcus felt his stomach twist. They were going after Lily again. He turned to Ranger, whispering, "Circle right. Quiet." The dog slipped into the shadows, disappearing like smoke. Marcus drew his pistol and crept closer, staying low, counting 3 men by the trucks, 1 near the building entrance. The 4th voice, the one that had spoken last, had to be Hale. He moved like someone used to commanding fear, pacing slowly between the dim light spilling from the broken windows. Marcus waited for an opening. When one of the men turned toward the forest, Marcus lunged, catching him by the throat and pulling him silently into the snow. He pressed the man's radio button, whispering, "All clear," mimicking his tone just enough to buy seconds. Then chaos erupted. Ranger came from the right, knocking another man flat, the sound of snarls mixing with shouts and gunfire. Marcus moved fast, 2 precise shots taking down the others before they could get their bearings. Then the door to the building burst open. Hale stood there, gun in hand, face pale but eyes wild. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice low, almost admiring. "You just can't help yourself." Marcus stepped forward, snow crunching under his boots. "You could have stopped this days ago," he said. "You had a choice." Hale laughed bitterly. "Choice? You think men like me ever have choices? Power chooses us, soldier. We just make use of it." "You call this power?" Marcus said. "You're a coward hiding behind hired guns." Hale raised the pistol, but Marcus was faster. He shot once, hitting Hale's shoulder. The CEO stumbled, gun clattering to the ground. "You think this ends with me?" Hale hissed. "It never ends." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his weapon. "It does tonight." Before Marcus could cuff him, headlights flared in the distance, the sheriff's cruisers, red and blue cutting through the dark. Dwyer had followed his trail after all. The deputies surrounded the yard within minutes, guns drawn. Dwyer looked at Marcus, shaking his head. "You just can't stay out of trouble, can you?" Marcus shrugged. He wasn't coming quietly. The sheriff glanced down at Hale, then back at Marcus. "Looks like you finished what the feds couldn't." "I just cleaned up what he started," Marcus said. Ranger sat beside him, chest heaving, eyes sharp but calm. The sheriff called for the medics, his breath misting in the cold. "You know," he said quietly, "the town owes you. You could stay, Reed. Build something here. Not every fight needs to be yours." Marcus looked toward the distant lights of Pine Hollow through the trees, the thought lingering longer than he expected. "Maybe," he said, "but some fights find you, no matter where you go." Dwyer smiled faintly. "You're a hard man to argue with." "Ask the last guy who tried," Marcus said, managing a weary grin. By the time they drove back to town, dawn was breaking again, soft pink and gold spreading across the horizon. The danger was over, at least for now. Hale would survive, but his empire was finished. Evidence stacked too high, allies too few. Marcus parked by the gas station, the place where it had all started. The snow was melting from the roof, dripping in steady rhythms. Lily stood by the window, watching them pull in. She came out onto the porch as Marcus stepped down from the truck, Ranger stretching beside him. "It's done," he said simply. She looked at him, eyes glistening, relief washing over her features. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already did," Marcus said. "You reminded me what's worth fighting for." Ranger nudged her hand, tail wagging lightly, breaking the moment's heaviness. She smiled, kneeling to hug him. "You're both heroes." Marcus shook his head. "Just doing what needed to be done." She looked up at him. "That's what heroes always say." He didn't reply, just stood there for a long moment. The quiet hum of the waking town filling the air, and for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe that maybe peace wasn't so impossible after all. The days that followed felt like waking up after a long storm. Pine Hollow slowly stitched itself back together, the fear that had haunted every corner of town easing into something like peace. Nathan Hale was transferred under heavy guard to Helena, his lawyers scrambling to explain away the crimes that no amount of money could bury. The story hit national news within 48 hours. Headlines calling it the fall of a modern tyrant, interviews with people who'd suffered under his shadow. But for Marcus, the Navy SEAL, none of that mattered. Justice wasn't about cameras or headlines. It was about quiet mornings like this one, sitting on the porch of his cabin with Ranger, the German Shepherd, watching the sunlight spill through the pines. For the first time in months, the air didn't taste like tension. It tasted like home. Sheriff Dwyer stopped by one morning, his cruiser crunching over the frost. "You planning to stick around?" he asked as he climbed out. Marcus shrugged. "Haven't decided." The sheriff smiled faintly. "Town could use a man like you, and that dog of yours. He's already got a fan club." Marcus looked down at Ranger, who wagged his tail lazily. "He's not big on crowds." "Neither are you," Dwyer said. "But maybe it's time you tried being part of one again." He handed Marcus a folded newspaper. "There's a quote in there from the cashier. The girl. She said you gave this town its spine back." Marcus unfolded the page, scanning the article. Lily, the blonde cashier, had been photographed outside the rebuilt gas station, smiling under the morning sun. The headline read, "Hope returns to Pine Hollow." Beneath it her words, "Some people don't just fight wars, they bring peace home with them." Marcus set the paper aside, his throat tightening. "She's tougher than she thinks," he said. "They always are," the sheriff replied. He tipped his hat and got back in his cruiser. "If you ever need something to do, we could use an extra hand on search and rescue. Storm season's coming." Marcus smiled faintly. "I'll think about it." "You do that," Dwyer said before driving off down the winding road. That evening, Marcus drove into town. The air was crisp, the snow mostly melted, puddles glinting like mirrors under the streetlights. The diner was full again, truckers, families, kids laughing. He parked across the street and watched for a moment, realizing how much had changed since that first night, when everything began. Lily was behind the counter, wiping down tables, her movements easy, confident. When she looked up and saw him through the window, her smile spread slow and genuine. He stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming like an old friend. "You made it," she said. "You said the coffee was better when you're not guarding the door," he said with a grin. "Figured I'd test that." She poured him a cup, setting it down gently. "So?" He took a sip. "Still terrible," he said. She laughed, the sound light and unguarded. "Guess some things don't change." They talked for a while about nothing and everything, about the sheriff's offer, the weather, the way the town had come alive again. For the first time in a long time, Marcus found himself not looking over his shoulder. When he finally stood to leave, Lily walked him to the door. "You know," she said softly, "you could stay. Pine Hollow could use someone like you." Marcus looked at her, the warmth of the diner behind her, the cold night outside. "I don't know if I'm the staying kind," he said. "Maybe not," she said, "but you're the right kind." He didn't answer, just gave her a small nod and stepped out into the street. Ranger was waiting by the truck, tail thumping against the door. Marcus scratched behind his ear. "Come on, boy, let's go home." They drove through the sleeping town, past the quiet streets and glowing windows, past the gas station that stood as a silent witness to everything that had changed. When they reached the edge of the woods, Marcus pulled over for a moment, looking out at the town lights below. "You know," he said softly, "I think we did all right." Ranger leaned his head against Marcus's arm, eyes half closed. The SEAL smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know. You did most of the work." He started the truck again, the road winding upward toward the cabin. When they reached it, the stars were out in full, blanketing the sky. Marcus stepped out, breathing deep. The world was quiet, no sirens, no shouting, just the soft sound of wind through the trees. Ranger ran ahead, bounding through the snow, barking once into the night. Marcus watched him, then looked up at the sky. "Maybe this time it's really over," he murmured. But deep down, he knew peace was something a man like him ever truly kept. It was something he protected for others. And that, he thought, was enough. The next morning, Lily showed up at his cabin unannounced, bundled in a heavy coat, her breath visible in the cold. "You weren't at the diner," she said, smiling nervously. "Thought I'd check on you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You walked up here?" "Drove halfway," she admitted. "Walked the rest. The road's rough." "You could have called." "And miss seeing Ranger?" she said, crouching to scratch the dog's neck. "Not a chance?" Marcus chuckled. "He's going to start expecting visitors now." She stood, her expression softening. "I wanted to say thank you, not for saving me, for reminding me that good people still exist." Marcus looked down, uncomfortable under praise. "You don't have to thank me." "I know," she said, "but I wanted to." There was silence for a moment, filled only by the rustle of trees. Then she said, "You ever think about staying for good?" He smiled faintly. "Every now and then." "Well," she said, turning toward the trail, "if you ever do, you know where to find me." Marcus watched her walk back down the snowy path, her figure growing smaller until she disappeared into the trees. Ranger barked once, as if asking if she'd be back. "Maybe," Marcus said. "Maybe she will." That night Marcus sat by the fire with Ranger curled beside him, the glow casting soft light over the worn wood floor. Outside the snow had stopped, and the moon hung low over the valley. The phone on the table buzzed. It was Sheriff Dwyer. The message was short. "Storm coming tomorrow. You in for search duty?" Marcus looked out the window at the stars, then down at Ranger, who was already awake, ears perked as if he understood. Marcus smiled. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We're in." He tossed another log on the fire, the flames rising higher, brighter. Somewhere far below, the town of Pine Hollow slept in peace, unaware of the man and his dog keeping quiet watch over them. And for Marcus Reed, for the first time in years, that was enough. The winter in Pine Hollow faded slowly, and by the time the first buds of spring began to push through the frost, the town had changed. The gas station stood rebuilt, brighter and busier than before, and the people who once kept their heads down now met each other's eyes again. It wasn't a perfect place, no small town ever was, but it felt alive. The story of Nathan Hale had already passed into something like legend, retold in whispers at the diner, in classrooms, and around bonfires, where young men talked about courage and what it meant to stand up for something when everyone else stayed quiet. The name Marcus Reed, the Navy SEAL, was rarely mentioned, but people knew. They knew who had been there the night justice came to Pine Hollow. Marcus himself never claimed any part in it. He spent most days helping Sheriff Dwyer with rescue calls, and nights walking the old forest trails with Ranger, the German shepherd, who never left his side. Sometimes he'd stop at the gas station for coffee, and Lily, the blonde cashier, would smile like it was still the first time she'd seen him walk through the door. The world had moved on from fear, and maybe, finally, so had he. One quiet evening, Marcus drove out to the ridge above the valley, where you could see the whole town glittering like a necklace of light in the dark. The air smelled of pine and rain. Ranger sat beside him, eyes scanning the horizon the way he always did. "Looks different now, doesn't it?" Marcus said softly. The dog tilted his head, ears twitching. "We did all right," Marcus murmured. "For once, maybe we did more good than harm." He thought about the years before Pine Hollow, the deployments, the nights spent staring at ceilings that didn't belong to him, the memories that followed like shadows. This place had given him something he hadn't realized he needed: purpose without war, peace without surrender. And though he still carried the ghosts of the past, they no longer felt heavy. They felt quieter. He turned the key in the ignition, ready to head back down, but something in the distance caught his eye. A faint light flickering at the far edge of the valley, a storm beacon. Search duty? He smiled faintly. "Looks like we're up, buddy," he said. Ranger barked once, tail thumping against the seat. Marcus drove toward the glow, the headlights cutting through the mist. The road curved along the ridge, leading them back toward the town that had somehow become home. At the gas station, Lily locked up for the night, humming softly under her breath. When she stepped outside, the air was cool and still. She looked up at the stars, then toward the forest, where a faint pair of headlights shimmered through the trees before disappearing behind the hill. She smiled, knowing exactly who it was. Somewhere out there, Marcus Reed was still watching over the town, still guarding it the way he always had. And though she'd never said it aloud, she knew Pine Hollow would always be safe, as long as he was out there. By the time the rain stopped, dawn had already begun to break. The light spread slowly over Pine Hollow, touching the rooftops, the diner, the gas station, the sheriff's office, the small church whose bell hadn't rung in years. It was a new day, the kind Marcus had never stayed long enough anywhere to see. He drove back to his cabin, Ranger curling up in the seat beside him, wet fur steaming in the warmth of the heater. When they pulled into the driveway, Marcus sat there for a moment, looking out at the forest, the mist curling between the trees. He felt tired, but not the kind of tired that demanded escape. The kind that meant he'd earned his rest. He got out, stretched, and looked toward the horizon. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was running from something. He was exactly where he needed to be. Inside, the cabin smelled of coffee and pine. Marcus hung up his jacket, lit the stove, and watched Ranger settle by the fire. He poured 2 cups of coffee, setting one down on the floor beside the dog out of habit. "You deserve it more than I do," he said with a grin. Outside, the wind rattled the windows lightly, but it no longer sounded like a threat. It sounded like home. As he sat there, warmth spreading through the small space, he thought of Lily's words about good people still existing, about courage being quiet, about light returning to dark places. She was right, and maybe, for the first time in a long time, Marcus believed it too. When the knock came on the door just after sunrise, it wasn't danger, it was peace. Sheriff Dwyer stood on the porch, hat in hand, smiling. "Town council's meeting this afternoon," he said. "They want to name the new rescue center after you." Marcus shook his head immediately. "That's not necessary." "It's not about you," Dwyer said. "It's about what you represent." Marcus looked past him at the morning sky, pale blue and wide open. "Tell them to name it after the people who built it," he said. "I just showed up when I was needed." The sheriff chuckled. "That's exactly why they want your name on it." He turned to leave, but paused at the steps. "You did good, Reed. Don't forget that." Marcus nodded. "You too." As the sheriff drove away, Marcus stepped out into the cold sunlight, taking one long look at the horizon before turning back inside. That night, as the sun disappeared behind the ridge, Marcus sat on the porch again with Ranger resting at his feet. The stars came out one by one, glittering above the dark pines. The town below glowed faintly, lights twinkling like fireflies. Marcus leaned back, his voice quiet but certain. "We made it, buddy," he said. Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching, before curling back up with a contented sigh. The world had gone quiet again, but this time it wasn't the silence before a fight. It was the kind of silence that came after victory, the kind that said the war was over and peace had finally found a place to stay. And under that endless Montana sky, Marcus Reed closed his eyes, letting the stillness wash over him, knowing that no matter what storms might come, Pine Hollow would never face them alone again. If this story of redemption and quiet courage touched your heart, please share it so others can remember that true strength doesn't shout, it simply stands its ground when it matters most. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate loyalty, compassion,